In an effort to recruit and retain volunteer firefighters and emergency medical personnel who are in high demand across rural and suburban parts of New York, state lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have pushed to boost a 20-year-old income tax credit for those volunteer first responders who are currently capped at a $200 credit. And in the final weeks of the legislative session in Albany, legislation was unanimously approved that quadrupled the credit and made technical changes to the existing property tax exemption that is also available. For more on this initiative and its pass through the Capitol, we're joined by the measure's Assembly sponsor, Buffalo area Democrat Karen McMahon. Thanks for making the time, Assembly member.
My pleasure, David. Nice to be with you.
Well, we often hear about the need for volunteer first responders in rural parts of the state, but your district includes the suburban community of Amherst outside of Buffalo. So what has been your experience, and is there a shortage of volunteer firefighters and EMS personnel?
Yes. So as you said, my district is the town of Amherst. It's right adjacent to the city of Buffalo and then travels up to the Niagara County line. So I have pretty much everything from very dense areas to pretty rural areas. The district is served by 9 different volunteer fire companies, though. We have no paid professional firefighters or emergency. Actually, there are emergency ambulances that are paid. Yeah. Well, I'm just talking firefighters. So yeah, we are in constant communication with these guys, men and women, actually, and the needs are great. It's difficult to get people to volunteer these days. People are busy. People don't have the time. A lot of these volunteer fire companies are served by retirees often. And I see also kind of a family tradition in service, which is really nice. But it's been hard to recruit, hard to retain people because the demands are so great, and it's volunteer service.
And the Firefighter Association of the state of New York has been pushing to update the tax credit that is available for volunteer firefighters and EMS personnel, which has been stuck at $200 for about 2 decades now. Your legislation would boost that up to $800 for a single filer. What are your expectations for this type of refundable credit? Are you anticipating this has a significant impact, or do you just hope that it holds the line in terms of the volunteer numbers?
I think it could have a really positive impact. What I've heard from volunteer firefighters and the companies in our district is that it's huge, that it really will make a difference. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out. Do we get it signed? Does it make it into a budget allocation? We're kind of at the beginning of the process here, I feel like, unfortunately, but I think it could have a really positive experience from what I've heard from FASNY and from individuals in the community.
And why is that? Because ultimately a $600 difference isn't enough for someone to say quit their job, right? It's spending money for a lot of people. I mean, this day and age, maybe it covers a couple months of your utility bills. So why do you have high expectations for that $600 difference?
I think it just sends a message too that their service is valued. Really, I think that's a really important part of it. We really rely on the volunteer fire service. It saves the state a ton of money every year. If we had to hire professional firefighters all across the state, it would just cost billions of dollars. So I think it really just tells our volunteers that your service is valued, you are important, we're doing our best as a state to make your service easier.
Another component of your bill is what's described as a technical correction to the property tax breaks on the local level that can also be available to first responders. What's the change that you're looking to make there?
Well, the change is really currently there's a choice that has to be made between the state, the income tax credit, and the local property tax credit. And this would eliminate that. They wouldn't have to pick or choose. They could do both. So that also sweetens the pot a little bit.
And is this something you've been hearing about for years, or has this been something that's kind of gotten on the radar recently as people try to potentially take advantage of both of them?
This particular bill has been around for a while, and I took it over when Fred Thiel retired. But we're always trying to find ways to help the volunteer fire service. I had a bill that would increase disability payments, among other things. My legislative director is a volunteer firefighter himself, so he always keeps me really in tune with issues facing the volunteer fire service. So this was an issue. The choice that had to be made was an important thing, an important component of the bill.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, there is a major cost savings to the state and municipalities for the volunteer firefighters. The estimate in your bill memo is, I think, $4.7 billion each year. And I'm curious whether you think this dynamic makes sense, because obviously there is a cost saving, but we're kind of scrambling for volunteers. You have these systems that are heavily reliant on their neighboring communities when there are extenuating circumstances. So should the state continue to rely on volunteers for these types of services, or do you think it makes sense to have some level of municipal or state funded EMS firefighters sort of as a requirement in New York?
Well, actually, volunteers save New York an estimated $3.8 billion a year.
Hmm.
And so I think
Your
the
your
numbers
bill
you
memo says $4.7 billion.
well, I think replacing them with a fully paid workforce would cost taxpayers
Mm.
4.7 billion.
Mm.
That's where that number came from. So, do we expect the state to switch to a paid force?
Should
I
we?
doubt it.
Should we, though?
Well, you know what? I think in a lot of communities, it's a really important component. As I said, there's a lot of family members who sort of pass down the tradition from father to son or nephew. I think volunteer fighters like doing the work as well. I don't know if we really could expect, could we really do that? Could we really afford it? I think there's a lot of volunteers who really enjoy the work as well.
Is there a point, though, at which we won't have those volunteers where we're going to be spending so much on incentives where it makes sense just to switch to a professional set of emergency first responders?
You know what, David? I really don't know
Okay.
if we've gotten to that point yet. I think that's a conversation further down the road. Right now, we're trying to increase opportunities for volunteers, and hopefully it will pay off, and we'll see an increase in volunteers.
And
That's my hope.
so the next stage for this bill is getting it signed by the governor, who generally is loath to endorse any sort of fiscal measure outside of the budget. So is this the case where you're anticipating a veto, or you're anticipating chapter amendments for incorporation in next year's legislative session? What are the realistic next steps?
hmm Well, we tried to get it into this year's budget, but I think there was so much focus on other things, as you know, in this budget, we didn't get there. I'm hopeful, as you said, she often vetoes things that have a fiscal impact, but my hope would be that perhaps chapter amendments and then being able to, get an allocation for next year. That's I'm hopeful for that, actually.
And what sort of allocation are you looking for? Because again, referring back to the bill memorandum, under the section of fiscal implications for state and local governments, we've got the classic TBD, to be determined.
Right, right. Right now, the credit as it stands is $15.2 million annually. So we're basically quadrupling it. If we're doing math, which I'm not great at, I think it's an additional 45 million, which would bring it to like a total of 60 million.
You don't anticipate, though, that this might prompt more people to volunteer, and thus you would have to go above that number because you'd have additional volunteers?
Well, I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out.
But I imagine you'd like it to
Yeah.
attract more
Oh,
volunteers, right?
well, that certainly would, or to retain the ones we have. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. We'll have to see how it affects the numbers. One step at a time. Do we get it signed? Do we get it funded? Does it actually do what it's supposed to do? And I'm hopeful on all those fronts.
Another option that was out there for lawmakers to consider was a credit from your Republican colleague, Joe Angelino, that was valued at about three times what you were proposing. How did you come up with $800 as opposed to, say, $2,500, which he was promoting?
Right. The Angelino bill was certainly more generous, but it would have been way more costly as well.
Mhm.
As I said, this bill it was a Fred Thiel bill before I took it over, before he retired. It just seemed like, and there were other bills out there too. I believe Kerry Warner had a version of it too that may have been a little more generous. It just seemed like a reasonable starting point as opposed to, trying to force through something at, $2,500 that likely wouldn't make it very far.
When you say likely wouldn't make it very far, what do you mean by that?
Uh, make it to the floor, well, pass, pass the House.
Well, there was a motion to discharge the bill to the floor, and while the handful of Democrats did side with the Republicans to bring it to the floor, it didn't get that motion approval, and so there never was a floor vote. I guess two parts. One, how did you vote on that motion? And two, what do you think about that broader issue about a bill with the wrong party affiliation basically being DOA in the Assembly?
Well, it was really kind of unfortunate the way that all played out. I saw that bill on the discharge list and I said, well, why would I support this bill when I have a bill that I think is better, that's more likely to pass? So actually did vote I voted no on the bill. Knowing that we were really pushing this one, and we continued our work. It was just a lot of persistence with leadership, with other bill sponsors to try and advance ours. In the face of it, I felt that, well, how discharge petitions are often used kind of as a political tool to get people on the record.
I'm shocked to hear this, but yes.
Yeah, so I felt personally that our volunteer firefighting force was kind of being used as a political pawn, that bill, I think, was kind of unrealistic and was never going to go anywhere. So it just gave me a lot of incentive to get mine to the floor, and we were successful.
Well, you mentioned trying to bring this bill up in the budget process, and I'm curious what that is like. Is this an issue where you're dealing with Phil Fields in Ways and Means and just nudging him? Is this something where you're in the speaker's ear? Well, what does it look like to try to get this type of tax credit as part of three-way negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above over there, but also division of budget, Blake, Washington. I know that there was a credit in the Senate one house. And so it was just kind of a push on all fronts. But as you know, things fall off, things jump in. We just didn't get there this year.
And do you have a sense of what your plan is between now and, say, December 31st, which is the latest we have to send bills over to the governor, to try to build momentum? Is it primarily a behind-the-scenes campaign? Do you think there's benefit to going more public and doing a sort of pressure campaign on the governor, so to speak? It is an election year.
I know it is an election year.
And everybody loves firefighters in election years.
Well, that's true. That's true. So I feel like we kind of have that in our back pocket, the fact that it's a good bill. And I know that the governor is sympathetic to the volunteer firefighters. I think that there's going to be probably a little bit of both behind the scenes lobbying, gathering memos of support. We have the support of FASNY, of course, and maybe a little press, a little front and center wouldn't hurt the effort too.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Karen McMahon. She is a Buffalo area Democrat. Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, David. Have a great day.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell and Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.